Hey everyone, Pastor George. It's good to be back on the East Coast. I'm back from the Golden State, from the California Republic. I'm all tanned up, just a little bit anyway. It went well, in case any of you are wondering. I know I'm going to get those questions, but it is good to be back. And we're continuing with our Theologs now that I am back, and I'm naming Thursdays as Culture Thursdays. And what I mean by that is it's kind of a working title. I'm still trying to figure out exactly everything it's going to encompass. But basically, I'm going to use Thursdays to talk about something that I read recently, that I maybe saw in the news recently, that I watched recently, and kind of talk about it and compare it to Christian themes, if there are any, or talk about how Christians should respond to something. So, one of the books I read and finished while I was in California, on my flights anyway, was The Hunchback of Notre Dame, or Notre Dame, or whatever, however you want to say it. It's pronounced Notre Dame in French, and every time I say Notre Dame, it makes me feel stupid, but that's how most people say it, so I'll just say it like that. So the actual title of the book in French is just Notre Dame, right? So it's just Our Lady, the cathedral in Paris, right? And I think most of us are probably familiar, at least in my generation anyway, most of us are familiar about this story from the Disney movie that came out, and that was pretty good, right? I like it. I think it's one of the few Disney movies that actually tries to talk about religion in any sense of the word, and that's because in the book, religion plays a major role. I mean, one of the characters, many of the characters are at least in name, they're all Christian, right? But in practice, I mean, one of the main villains is a deacon, right, in the church, and another is Quasimodo. He lives in the church, and a lot of it happens in Notre Dame. So it's a pretty interesting story, but it's not a very good book, so I wouldn't recommend reading it. But one of the interesting things that Victor Hugo, who's the guy that wrote it, he also wrote Les Mis. Maybe you've read that or seen the play. I've just seen the Russell Crowe movie. Lucky me. But he talks a lot about religion in his work. And he spends a lot of time talking about the way that architecture can kind of play into religious sensibilities, right? And of course, if you've been to Paris, I haven't been to Paris since the fire in Notre Dame, so I don't know how that's changed things. But if any of you have been to Paris, maybe you have seen the cathedral there, and it's incredibly beautiful, right? And the way it is able to affect people is amazing. And so he spends a lot of time in the book talking about that, and that's really the best part. All the characters are kind of boring or whatever, but and the Disney movie talks a little bit about that too. But it gets you to thinking about how do we communicate through our architecture or the way that we express ourselves religiously, right? And so you may show up to churches and you may think that they all look the same, right? Or you may not understand why CPC looks the way it does as opposed to a Catholic church down the road, right? Why do some churches look more fancy than other churches or whatever? Now, obviously, most of us probably think that has something to do with money, right? So if you don't have enough money, your church isn't going to look as nice as other people's. And that can be somewhat true, right? A new carpet or whatever. But a lot of the things that we choose to do when we make our sanctuary, and maybe some of you who were there for when the sanctuary was put in might remember some talk about this. But we try to make our spaces help people think about God, right? That's kind of the role of the church building in and of itself, besides just to serve as a meeting place. And so if you look at all the different places, I know I brought this up before, but if you look at all the different places, it kind of communicates something different. And so one of the things that I was thinking about when I was reading The Hunchback of Notre Dame was, how does our church communicate what we believe when you step through into the sanctuary, right? And that's something for you to also think about. But I think what we lack a lot, I guess, in ostentatiousness, which I think is a good thing, because that's not really what we believe Christianity to be about, right? We have whitewashed walls or whatever, beige? I don't know. Whatever color they are. I'm not good with colors. And we have plain glass, right, with, normal shades in front of them, basically, if we want to put them there. And in terms of symbols. We have some symbols carved into the wood, right, and the podiums and stuff. We have the the green and purple stuff that we drape everywhere. I'll think about it if the word comes to me. And, of course, we have the wooden cross in the back. We have a golden cross off to the side, and we have the flags, right? And the point of why we have our sanctuary like this, at least in the traditional way of thinking about these things, is to not draw people's attention away from God, right? Because if you've ever been to one of those beautiful cathedrals, you're obviously going to be enthralled with the images and things, and maybe you'll be focusing more on those than you will on what is being preached, what is being said, and you can kind of lose it all. So that's what that book got me thinking of. I wouldn't rate the book very highly, so I wouldn't suggest reading it. I'd see the Disney movie instead. They did a better job of adapting it and making it better. So so that's what I did, and that's kind of what this is going to be next week. I'm hoping to do something about sci-fi next week, but we'll see how that goes. So I hope you guys have a wonderful Thursday, and I will see you tomorrow.